All right, how's it going? We're going to talk a little bit today about price controls. First thing about price controls when you're looking at it, and of course when you're looking at any graph, you want to make sure to label your axes. We've got that taken care of, but of course we're looking at our demand curve and our supply curve. In any case, when you're looking at supply and demand, you always have to consider about the surplus, and that's one of the things to think about with supply and demand curves. Anything that is below the demand curve but above the equilibrium price, this is considered part of the consumer surplus. In other words, consumers would be willing to pay for anything below this price. But because they're able to, be willing for any quantity inside this, but because they're getting this extra quantity for this price, that is a benefit that the consumers get. On the other hand, above the supply line, but below the price equilibrium, is the producer surplus. This is the benefit and the extra that comes into the producer. That's their profit when they're coming over this in the greater sense. So this brings us to our general idea of price controls. There's two main price controls that can be instituted by a government entity: a price floor and a price ceiling. So let's start first with a price ceiling. Now, a price ceiling in this case works if it is below the equilibrium point. Notice a ceiling is as high as you can go. The government has stated that prices can go this high and no higher. A good example of this would be rent controls or prices on gasoline, saying that we feel that we need to help the consumer by saying they can pay no more than this. But notice what it has done is it has lowered the price. Now, consumers, the demand has actually increased. But of course, what you get is the lowest of the sides. So the supply has decreased. This gap in between these, this ends up being a shortage. In other words, way more is going to be demanded for this low price than is going to be supplied. Consumers will come in and will buy far more than is being supplied. In the surplus, what you also have is this price there is lost. So you used to have, what you have here is this is the deadweight loss. This is what's lost to society. And so when prices are lower, it helps the consumers. And so the consumer surplus, you notice in this hand, actually increases here. So your consumer surplus is going to grow. But what happens is your producer surplus is going to decrease. And so you have a lower price, and what you're ending up with is everything within the black area has been lost to society. And you're ending up with much fewer than you would need in the first place. While you are trying to help the consumer by putting in a price ceiling, what you actually do is hurt them because you're decreasing the amount that is available for them to buy. So even though it might be cheaper, many people who want to buy it will no longer be able to buy it. So now let's transition for a second and think about a price floor. So once again, we've got our demand, we've got our supply, and we're going to implement an effective price floor. This is usually done in order to help an industry. When you might feel that, hey, our industrial methods are being hurt, we're going to save jobs, we're going to save workers by saying that you can't pay any less for this than a certain amount, which of course the suppliers are happy about. The suppliers are willing to supply a much higher quantity. But, as we know, it goes to the lowest extreme. Because it costs more and the price is increased, what you really end up with is the new quantity of the price floor, which is what consumers are willing to purchase. Which means all the benefit inside this triangle that would have existed before, this is lost. All this profit, all this productivity that might have existed in society is gone, is done. You have less of something, but you're going to pay a higher quality for less. So you can probably guess, if you're getting less of it but paying more, the person it hurts the most is the consumer. So the consumer surplus ends up decreasing here. And what you end up helping, on the other hand, is the producer. The producer surplus, at least in theory, you help the producer. So the producer surplus grows in quite a large way. But what you end up with is the producer is producing quite a large amount, but the consumer will not buy it. The consumer is not willing to pay for it pay for that quantity at that price. So what you actually have here is a surplus, or much more of something than you otherwise would have needed. All right, that's all. Thank you very much.